I've always been the second choice, the last thought in my family, the shadow that no one looked back for if they didn't have to take out the trash or find someone to blame for the milk going sour in the fridge again. My name is Ariana. I am 29 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my sister Kiara has been the one, a golden child, shining like the morning sun in the eyes of her parents, wrapped in their love and boundless trust, while I remain somewhere on the periphery, in semitones and understatements, where instead of hugs there are reproaches, and instead of support, a condescending shake of the head. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. Kiara is 4 years older than me, and according to the endless dinner conversations and lunch exchanges between mom and dad, she has always been smarter, more beautiful, more talented, more balanced, with more potential, more mature, more worthy than anyone, including me, her own sister. Ariana, you have to understand, Mom said in a voice that didn't contain a drop of pity, that you're not as gifted as your sister. And she didn't even try to soften this blow, neither in tone, nor in facial expression, nor in words, just dryly, precisely, coldly, like a surgical scalpel cutting through the remnants of a child's hope for equal love. We don't want you to have false illusions about yourself, she added, as if caring, although in fact it was just another attempt to prepare me for the role of an eternal backup who would never be allowed to enter the field. It was hard growing up with such support, especially when all the family's attention was focused on one single person, Kiara, her projects, exams, friends, hairstyles, decisions, vacations and endless victories, of which there were so many that there seemed to be no room in the house for anything else but talking about her. I've learned to cope. It took a while, not without pain, but I learned because I simply had no choice. When Kiara graduated from high school, her parents made every effort to get her into a prestigious college. They not only paid for her tuition, but also rented a separate apartment in another city, not because it was necessary, but because she did not want to live in a dormitory with these people, as she put it, wrinkling her nose, as if it were mold on bread. Meanwhile, I quietly watched what was happening, knowing that my turn would come, but not expecting anything similar from this cue. When it came time for me to choose a college 3 years later, my parents invited me to dinner. I naively thought that they wanted to discuss my options, maybe even support me, as it was with Kiara, but instead of hearing words of approval, I received a cold, categorical phrase. "We don't have money for your college," my father said at dinner, without looking up from his plate. "You'll have to figure something out for yourself." Kiara was sitting next to him, completely absorbed in her new phone, which, by the way, her parents bought her, and did not even bother to look up. That's what I did. I got a job at a local cafe, worked there for a year, saving every penny, living under the same roof with my parents, enduring constant reproaches and reminders of how lucky I was that they still let me live with them. Then I took out a student loan big enough to cover my tuition and at least part of my life away from home, and went to college. I combined study and work, exhausting shifts and night lectures, and returned home to a tiny room in a rented apartment with the feeling that the whole world was resting on my shoulders. My parents barely noticed my efforts, sometimes asking if I could go to them for groceries or transfer money to the communal services if they suddenly had unforeseen expenses. After graduating from college, I got an entry-level position at a marketing firm. It was far from a dream, but it was the beginning, and it seemed to me that now I could exhale. But the debts were crushing, the student loan was eating up almost everything I earned, and my old, barely alive car was constantly threatening to fail completely. I tried, I fought, I didn't let myself give up. And at that moment, my parents invited me to dinner again. "We need to talk about something important," my father said, and for the first time in a long time there was something like seriousness in his voice. My stomach tightened, a premonition of trouble. "Your father's working hours have been reduced," Mom explained and, as if casually, put her hand on his arm. "We're struggling to make ends meet. We were hoping that you would help us financially until everything gets better." I hesitated. I didn't know if I could. I was already drowning in debt. I started to say something, to explain, but my father interrupted me, his face turned to stone. "Forget it," he said. It seems that the dinner is over. I've lost my appetite." They got up, leaving me sitting at the table alone, with this oppressive feeling of guilt that hit me with such force that in the following days I hardly slept, suffered from stomach pain, and all the time thought what to do. In the end, I made up my mind. I asked my boss for extra shifts and called my parents. "I can send you $700 a month," I said. "That's all I can do right now, but I hope it's enough." Mom answered quickly, her voice warming. "When you get a promotion, you'll be able to help us more," she said. "Neither thanks, nor will it help us, only the hope of a large sum in the future." So 2 years have passed. I gave my parents $700 a month, while Kiara, who already had a well-paid job, continued to receive money from them. They even paid for her vacation in the Maldives after her promotion. When I finally got my promotion, there was no dinner in honor of this event, nor a call with congratulations. Just a dry message from Mom, "That's great, honey. We thought you could increase your monthly contribution to $1,000. Now I wanted to say no. No, firm, confident, loud, the kind that leaves no room for doubt, compresses the air around and makes the interlocutor freeze. I wanted to scream that this was unfair, that I was tired of being their ATM, their backup plan, their eternal source of stability, while Kiara lived as if all the doors of the world were opening for her on their own. But I knew what would happen if I dared to protest: silent treatment, long pauses in conversation, sarcastic phrases thrown in between, passive-aggressive comments that would cling to the most painful thing, to insecurity, to a sense of guilt that had been hammered into me for years with such subtle persistence that it sprouted in my soul, like grass through concrete. So I agreed again. "My good girl," Mom said, and I hated how those words made me feel both pleased and used, as if I'd been given a bone for sacrificing myself again. For years, I worked, saved, and struggled, sorting through reports at night, meeting Dawn at the bus stop early in the morning, barely keeping my eyes open from fatigue, and all in order to finally make the last payment on my student loan 7 long years after graduation. It was the moment I was waiting for, like liberation, like the first deep breath after being held underwater. I felt lighter than I had in years. It's easier than the day I got my degree, easier than the day I first saw my name on the company's employee list on the official website. It was like removing shackles, invisible but heavy, like chains pulling me down. That evening, with an extraordinary lightness in my chest, I bought a bottle of good, really expensive wine, not for show, but in honor of myself, and went to my parents' house, naively hoping that they would be happy for me, that this would be an occasion for something real, albeit small, but a sincere celebration. When I entered, Kiara was already there, sprawled on the couch with the air of a hostess, as if the house rightfully belonged to her and only to her, as if I were a casual guest there. "What kind of event? What is it?" she asked, looking at the bottle in my hands with a slight sneer. "I made the last payment on my student loan today," I said, and couldn't help the pride that broke through my voice. "I am officially debt-free." Kiara rolled her eyes and snorted. "That's what you're celebrating?" "God, Ariana, this is so boring." Before I could respond, she abruptly snatched the bottle from my hands and, as if nothing had happened, turned to her parents with a dazzling, theatrical smile. "Let's celebrate what's really important," she said with such pathos, as if she were announcing her victory on stage. "I've met this amazing guy, he's got money, and I'll bring him to you next week." And at that moment, I saw my parents' faces light up with such a light, such genuine delight, which I had never seen in their eyes when I told them about my work, my successes, my achievements. They didn't say a word about Kiara taking my wine. They didn't notice how she stole my moment, as if it was natural, as if it had never belonged to me. They started bombarding her with questions about this man, laughing, listening to every word, forgetting about me, forgetting why I came at all. I sat there for about an hour, picking at a plate of cheese and crackers, unable to get a word out of myself, swallowing the bitterness that seemed to settle in my throat. Then, as quietly as I had come, I slipped out the door, leaving them in a circle of admiration and empty toasts. No one even noticed that I was gone. That night, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if anything would change. The loan was paid off, but I still felt constrained, as if I was being held on a short leash by my parents' expectations, their silent demands, and the role that I had been assigned many years ago and from which there seemed to be no way out. After the incident with the wine, I began to distance myself from my family more and more, answering calls less and less often, minimizing communication, and even then it was mostly monthly reminders from my parents. Don't forget to send $1,000 this month, Ariana. Not a word about my life, my work, or my feelings. Just an invoice. Just a duty. I didn't call Kiara, and she didn't call me either. There was always a wall of misunderstanding between us, but now that wall has become a chasm. That's why I was genuinely surprised when on Tuesday afternoon, right during work, my phone's screen lit up with her name. Hello? I replied cautiously, staring at his screen as if it were a bomb with a timer. Ariana, finally, he sounded annoyed. Listen, my birthday is in 2 weeks. No greetings, no like you, not even a hint of interest in my business. Everything was the same as always, just about her. I'm turning 33, and I'm throwing a party at Bellini's, she continued. Bellini's is one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, where ordinary people go once a year if they are lucky. Of course, I'm sending you 3 gift options, she continued, as if everything had already been decided. Pick one and buy it for me. Otherwise, you'll probably give me something useless like last year. Last year, I made her a homemade photo album with our childhood photos, rare, precious, faded from time and memories. She barely glanced at it, flipped through it like an advertising booklet, and put it in a drawer. And don't be late. The booking is at 7, she finished and hung up, leaving me in silence, with the phone at my ear and the dull echo of my own breathing. A few minutes later, my phone beeped again, and a message from Kiara appeared on the screen, 3 links to products, accompanied by neither an explanation, nor a request, nor, even more so, gratitude. The first led to an $850 designer handbag, the second to a pair of earrings encrusted with something shiny and unnecessary, priced at $650, and the third to a cashmere sweater that cost only $550, which, judging by the intonation of her voice message, should have been considered an economical option. I clicked on the third link, choosing the cheapest of the gifts offered, not because I wanted to give it to her, but because it already seemed to me that I was paying her, them, with my life, time, care, attention, money. I ordered an express-delivered sweater to avoid being criticized for being late, and that evening it was delivered in a gift box sparkling like a jewel. On her birthday, I dressed carefully, as if I were entering an arena where every wrong move could be interpreted as weakness or a challenge. I chose my blue dress, the one I kept for a special occasion, the one I felt a little more confident in than usual. Wrapping the gift in silver paper, with a neatly matched bow, I headed to the Bellini's restaurant, the one where a glass of wine was my lunch of the day. The hostess led me to a large round table in the far corner of the hall, where a dozen guests were already sitting, my parents, their friends, some people I didn't know. They all seemed to be part of another world, brighter, louder, and pleased with themselves. I sat down in an empty seat next to cousin Eduardo, who gave me a sympathetic look, as if he already knew how this evening would end. When it was time for toasts, my father, usually taciturn and reserved, raised his glass for the first time in a long time. His voice was trembling, full of emotion, perhaps fueled by wine and pride, to our beautiful, brilliant daughter Kiara, on her 33rd birthday. Your mother and I couldn't be more proud of the woman you've become. We love you more than words can express. Mom stood next to him, her eyes shining like the lights on a Christmas tree, and when she said that they had given Kiara a check for $25,000 to help with the down payment on housing, I almost choked on champagne. $25,000 is more than they've ever given me combined. On my 25th birthday, they gave me a $300 gift card and complained about the expenses. We know how much you dream about your home, Mom said then, as if she were talking not to me, but to Kiara through me. Kiara stood up, feigning emotion, and raised her glass. I want to thank my wonderful parents for always making me feel like the most desirable daughter in the world. Thanks to your love and generosity, I have never needed anything. She said these words, looking directly at me, and there was a slight, almost imperceptible smirk on her lips, as a sign of victory in a game that I did not even agree to play. The parents applauded enthusiastically, as if it were a Nobel Prize winner's speech. The table fell silent, someone coughed, someone looked away. My uncle picked up a glass, Eduardo shifted in his chair. They all knew, felt the tension that permeated the air, knew about favoritism, but pretended they didn't know. It wasn't a secret, but it was taboo. Well, let's continue, Chiara said cheerfully, pushing her hair back. Aunt Benedetta, is there something you want to say? But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the champagne, maybe the check for $25,000, or maybe the look of self-satisfaction on Chiara's face. Whatever it was, I felt my legs lift me off the chair by themselves. Before Aunt Benedetta could speak, I said in a flat, calm voice that didn't match the storm inside, "Actually, I think it's my turn to speak now." There was silence at the table. Chiara tensed, her smile fading. I looked around at everyone and continued, "It seems that you have forgotten that there are 2 daughters in this family." Mom blinked, and an expression appeared on her face, as if I had violated some kind of ritual. I continued, "Not just alone, sparkling, successful, beloved. But I'm also the one who works 12 hours a day, who has been paying his debts for 7 years, who sends you $1,000 every month. You don't even know the address of my apartment. You've never asked me how I'm doing, you've never visited me, you've never been interested in my work. But that doesn't stop you from taking money from me." My father cleared his throat, clearly wanting to say something, but I didn't let him interrupt. "Do you know what's amazing? That despite all this, you still consider yourself good parents. But you know what? I finished. The money will no longer be coming in. And I'm done pretending that we're a real family." Mom screamed, "You can't do that." But I had already turned around, ready to leave, and there was only one question in my head: if I really get up and leave, will someone, at least someone at this table, stop me? The road home was blurred by the lights of passing cars and a mosaic of thoughts that swirled in my head like fragments of a badly glued dream, and each of them invariably returned to the shocked expressions on my parents' faces, to the way Chiara sat with her mouth open, unable to find an answer, to the awkward, suffocating silence that hummed behind at the festive table when I spoke, and even though a part of me, raised in the spirit of restraint, obedience, and guilt, felt a little regret for making a scene at my sister's birthday party, a much larger part finally felt something new, an unfamiliar, almost frighteningly liberating feeling of inner clarity, as if for the first time I had pulled back the curtain and allowed myself to see the truth in all its nakedness. When I returned home, kicking off my heels at the door, poured myself a glass of red wine and plopped down on the sofa, I realized that I didn't have the usual lump of anxiety, that dull pressure in my stomach that squeezed me every time I thought about money, about another transfer to my parents, about like having to postpone buying a new jacket or postponing going to the doctor again. That night, I went to bed without turning on my phone, without going over possible scenarios of their reaction in my head, without expecting any apologies or threats, just allowing myself to relax, as if nothing was required of me. The next morning, I woke up in an apartment shrouded in morning light and felt strangely light, as if my soul had become a few grams lighter, even though I already knew what was waiting for me. I made coffee, took a deep breath of the aroma that filled the kitchen, and discreetly pressed the power button on my phone. The device immediately came to life, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The screen was filled with notifications, one after another: 15 missed calls from Mom, 7 from Dad, 3 from Chiara, 28 text messages, each of which began with an increasingly oppressive tone. I flipped through them, and with each reading, my stomach tightened more and more. "Call me right now, young lady," Mom demanded. "Your mother is very upset." "You need to apologize," my father added, as if his voice had the force of law. "Thank you for ruining my birthday, you selfish one," came from Chiara, accompanied by a string of messages from her mother, We're counting on this money, Ariana. It's not fair to us. And then, after all we've done for you, this is how you repay us." I laughed bitterly at the last one. What exactly did they do for me? Is it because they've been saying all my life that I'm not as good as my sister? That they forced me to pay for my education while they were fully covering Kairino? Well, maybe they really did a lot for me. But then I noticed other messages, and it took my breath away. They were from relatives who attended the ill-fated dinner. "I'm proud of you, Ariana." I should have said that a long time ago, Aunt Benedetta wrote. "It was tense yesterday, but you finally stood up for yourself," Cousin Eduardo added. "Your parents were always unfair." "It's good that you said that," Uncle Bob said frankly. These words, so simple and sincere, brought tears to my eyes, not because I was hoping for support, but because I did not expect it at all. I suddenly realized that I wasn't alone. That all this time someone saw, someone knew, someone also felt that love was unevenly distributed in our family, and that I, always the second, finally declared myself. I took a deep breath, opened the banking application with trembling fingers, went to the recurring payments section and found the same one, the monthly transfer to my mother's account, programmed as something sacred and unchangeable. I hovered over the cancel button, held it there for a split second, as if giving myself the last moment to doubt, and then pressed. A confirmation appeared on the screen: the regular payment has been cancelled. For the first time in many years, I felt that I was acting not out of fear, not out of duty, but of my own free will, and this feeling was surprisingly peaceful. The next 2 weeks passed strangely quietly. I blocked the numbers of my parents and Chiara so that I wouldn't see new messages or hear the ringing in my ears from another approach. I went to work, had dinner with friends, watched movies, walked around the evening city, and for the first time in many years I didn't feel like I was walking on thin ice, afraid of stumbling. I didn't feel like I was under the watchful, appraising gaze of my family, for whom I had always been just a background, an extra in the life of their main character. And that's when I started to believe that maybe they had given up, accepted my silence as the end. I received an email from my mom. "Ariana, we noticed that the money didn't go through this month. I'm sure it's just an oversight on your part, but we need you to fix it urgently. Your father and I depend on this contribution. Please reconsider your hasty decision and resume payments. Mom." Then there was another letter, more nervous. "How could you not admit what happened in the restaurant?" Chiara was in tears. The money didn't arrive, and we had to cancel several necessary expenses. "Call us immediately." I didn't answer. I didn't even think about answering. But I did something I'd never done before, and I sent this letter to Chiara with a single line: "Maybe you could help them for a change." She answered a few minutes later, with the same cold directness with which she always built boundaries when it came to feelings, and with that special shade of condescension that had been inherent in her since childhood. "It's not my responsibility. You're just trying to get away from your obligations. They're your parents too." I stared at the phone screen, not believing that even now, after all that was said and done, she still sees me not as an equal, not as a sister, but as a service mechanism for solving family problems. I quickly typed back: "It's funny that they've always treated you like their only child. Now that money is involved, I've suddenly become their daughter." She didn't answer, and I wasn't surprised, because Chiara was always silent when it came to responsibility. Another week passed, and life gradually returned to its new rhythm. I was cooking dinner, something simple but cozy, allowing me to feel the warmth of everyday life, when the doorbell suddenly rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and so, cautiously approaching the door, I looked through the peephole and saw what I least expected. My parents were standing on the threshold of my apartment, looking as if life itself had slightly battered them over the past week. My heart started beating sharply, as if from a sharp reminder of an old alarm. Instinctively I wanted to take a step back, pretend that I was not at home, but the light turned on in the hallway betrayed my presence. I took a deep breath, pulled myself together, and opened the door only halfway, leaving the chain in place, as if this thin metal link could protect me from previous resentments. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised at how calm my voice sounded, in which there was only a barely audible note of disbelief. They looked not like confident people who always held power in their hands, but like those who came to ask, not being sure that they would be asked to stay. His father's shirt was rumpled, something was unusual. His mother's hair, always perfectly styled, was pulled back into a careless ponytail, which seemed like a desperate attempt to maintain the remnants of control. "Ariana, please," Mom said, her voice quieter than usual, almost pleading. "May I come in? We need to talk." I paused, assessing their expressions, then slowly unhooked the chain and retreated deeper into the apartment. They entered cautiously, as if they were entering a strange, unknown territory, and only now did I realize that this was indeed their first visit to me, to my own life, to my world, which they had ignored for so many years. "How did you find out my address?" I asked when they stood awkwardly in my living room, trying to look around, as if assessing what they could call familiar. We asked Aunt Benedetta," the father confessed, slightly lowering his gaze, as if he was surprised that it was necessary. "Of course," I said, unable to contain my irony. "What do you want?" I tried to speak evenly, with restraint, but a note of irritation still broke through into my voice. For too many years I had been waiting for this interest, this alleged concern, and now I could not believe that it had come not as love, but as a necessity. Mom sighed and looked at me with an expression on her face that she seemed to have been cooking in her mind all week. "Ariana, we're sorry. We've been thinking about what you said at the restaurant, and you were right. We were unfair to you, we weren't interested in your life the way we should have been." I stared at them, not allowing myself to believe so easily. "And we want to fix everything," the father added, taking a step forward. "We miss you." "You miss my money," I snapped, sharply, clearly, without hints. "It's not true," Mom exclaimed, but I already saw that spark in her eyes, that slight hesitation that gave everything away. "You're not sorry about how I was treated," I spoke calmly, without raising my voice. "You're sorry that I finally stopped being silent. That your ATM broke down. That I don't play by your rules anymore." "Ariana, please," my father began, but I raised my hand to stop him. "No. I don't want to hear it. I've spent my whole life trying to earn your love and approval. I'm tired. I'm not going to compete with Kiara anymore. I'm not going to feel like I'm the second, worst, inappropriate. I will no longer send you hard-earned money as long as you continue to ignore everything that I am." They looked at each other, truly confused, as if they had just realized how far they had come, and how grown-up the one they had not wanted to see for so long had become. "We'll give you time to think," Mom said softly, approaching the door. "We'll be waiting for your call." They left soon after, leaving behind a strange feeling of emptiness and liberation at the same time. I closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling my heart pounding. Part of me desperately wanted to believe that they were sincere, that there was real remorse in their apologies. But the other part, the older, wiser part, the one that lived in me since childhood, when I was taught to wait when I was left in the background, knew that everything they do was always related to what they need. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, replaying our conversation, asking myself the same question. Was I being too cruel? Shouldn't I have given them another chance? But every time this question came up, I remembered the birthdays they hadn't attended, the victories they hadn't noticed, the words they'd said, comparing me to Kiara as if I were just a failed sketch in front of a perfect picture. And most importantly, I remembered how they didn't know where I lived, they didn't know where I worked. The next morning, I called Aunt Benedetta. She replied with the warmth that I always missed so much in my parents' house, and her voice, full of sincere concern, sounded almost like a hug. "Hi, honey, how are you holding up?" I was silent for a moment, choosing my words, not knowing how best to formulate my question, but in the end I just said it bluntly, without circumlocution, as I recently started learning how to do. "Did you know that my parents are going to come to me?" My aunt sighed, and in that sigh there was everything: doubt, guilt, sympathy, and perhaps even a drop of anxiety. "They called me," she confessed, and asked for your address. I was hesitating, really. I didn't want to give it to them right away, but then I thought maybe they were finally ready to make amends. Was I wrong? I didn't know how to respond to this, and I honestly admitted, I'm not sure. They said they were sorry, but it seemed to me that they were most sorry that the money had stopped, not the way they treated me. There was a pause, and then my aunt said with a kind of sad but clear understanding, "Your parents have always been like this." She paused, obviously searching for a word that wouldn't sound too cruel, and finished softly but firmly, "They just never knew how to admit they were wrong." But maybe it's a start after all. Maybe, I repeated, but without much conviction. Aunt, as if sensing my inner struggle, asked, "What are you going to do?" I was silent for a long time, looking out the window at the waking city, and then I answered in the same tone that always sounds confident, even if it's fragile, "I don't know yet. But one thing is for sure, I will no longer send them money." "Good for you," she said abruptly, without a shadow of doubt. "And, Ariana, I want you to know, I'm proud of you. You've worked so hard, and you've achieved so much on your own, without anyone else's help." Those words seemed to hit my chest, causing tears that I couldn't stop. Why? Why did my own parents never tell me anything like that? Why was only an outsider, even a close one, able to recognize my efforts? A week has passed. My parents never contacted me. Then another one. I kept waiting for them to reappear on my doorstep or find some way to reach out to me, bring back that old chain of guilt, but silence. And at first, I felt relief, the lightness that you feel when you get rid of constant pressure, as if you had lifted an invisible weight from yourself. And then there was a strange disappointment when I realized that they might have just given up. They didn't struggle, they didn't try to understand. They retreated. Exactly 1 month after their visit, I received a letter. This letter is not an email, not a message, not a call. The envelope had Kiara's neat handwriting on it. I almost threw it away without opening it. For too many years this handwriting meant demand, expectation, condemnation, but something inside me wouldn't let me. Curiosity, maybe. Or the desire to understand what the one who always got everything wants now. There was a single sheet of paper inside. No colored ink, no postcards or hearts. Just a white sheet covered with Kiara's smooth, restrained handwriting, "Ariana. Mom and Dad are having financial difficulties without your donations. They had to cut back a lot. Dad is looking for a second job, and Mom is talking about going to work for the first time in 20 years. They asked me to help them, but I can't afford it now. My boyfriend and I broke up, and I had to move into a smaller apartment. I know we've never been close. And I know that I was a favorite. I didn't ask for it, but I didn't refuse either. I never realized how much they depended on you financially, until now. It's unfair that they expected so much from you, giving me so much. I'm not asking you to start sending the money again. I just wanted you to know that they're really fighting. Maybe call them. Kiara." I stared at the letter, not knowing how to feel. Kiara, who recognizes injustice. Kiara, which does not require me to renew payments. It was so atypical that I reread the letter 3 times, looking for the usual catch in it, a hidden accusation, reproach, manipulation, hint. But it didn't seem to be there this time. That evening, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in deep, calm colors, and thought about my family. Not with pain, not with anger, but with that sad clarity that comes when everything is said and done. For the first time in my life, I was financially free. My student loans have been fully paid off. I saved money every month, little by little, but steadily. I even started looking for a car to finally replace my dying sedan, which had served me faithfully, but was about to fall apart. All this became possible only because I no longer supported my parents, no longer obeyed their expectations and demands. But was I happy? Yes, I realized with some surprise. Yes, I was happy. I had friends who were genuinely interested in my life. I had a job that was enjoyable. And most importantly, I had the freedom to choose what to do with my money, time, and soul. The freedom to live without eternal guilt, without having to prove that I am worthy of love. I no longer needed my family's approval to be happy. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number, and although everything in me screamed that I shouldn't answer, that it was better to continue living in the fragile balance that I had finally found, contrary to common sense, I still ran my finger across the screen and pressed the phone to my ear. "It's Dad," came a voice, hoarse, slightly trembling, unlike his usual confident tone. "Ariana, please don't hang up on me. Your mom and we've been thinking a lot." I was silent, listening, and even though my heart was already preparing to expose the armor, my mind was saying, "Wait." "We were wrong," he continued, and with each sentence his voice sounded quieter, as if he were ashamed, as if the words he uttered were bursting from depths where he had not looked for years. "We've always been wrong about how we treated you. We took you for granted, expected too much, and gave you too little, and we're so sorry." It was the first sincere apology I had ever heard from him, without excuses, without hints of guilt on my part. But I already knew how words sound, which are not always followed by actions. "Dad," I started, but he cut me off quickly, as if he was afraid I'd hang up. "No, please let me finish. We don't expect you to start sending us money again. That's not why I'm calling. We miss you. And we would like to get a chance to become better. To become the parents you deserve." I closed my eyes, feeling two voices fighting inside, one full of hope, the other full of suspicion, nurtured by years of pain and deception. "I do not know if I can believe you," I whispered, and in response I heard, "I understand. We don't deserve your trust. But if you want to, we'd like to try. Maybe someday, we could meet for coffee. Just to talk." I was silent for a long time, fighting the urge to refuse and the urge to believe. "Maybe," I said, "but not yet. I need more time." "We'll wait," he promised, and there was no pressure or expectation in his voice, just silence and agreement. "No matter how long it takes." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, digesting everything I had just heard. Was this another attempt at manipulation? Or was it really the first step toward something new and sincere? I did not know. And I didn't want to find out yet. The next few months were truly transformative for me. Thanks to the extra money that I was able to save after the termination of financial assistance to my parents, I finally moved into a brighter, spacious apartment with a balcony and park windows. I bought a new car, not a luxury one, but a reliable one that didn't require a plea to start on a cold morning. And, most importantly, I got another promotion at work, and this time I celebrated it the way I always wanted to, with friends, with fun, with a glass of champagne, not alone, not in the shadows, but in a circle of people who were really dear to me and who they never made me feel unnecessary. I kept in touch with Aunt Benedetta, Cousin Eduardo, and several other relatives who were there for me at a difficult moment, but I kept a respectful distance from my parents and Chiara. I needed this space to understand who I was, without their constant expectations, without their judgmental looks and devaluing phrases that soaked into my skin like tattoos. 6 months after that argument at the restaurant, I finally agreed to meet my parents for coffee. We chose a small, cozy cafe, a neutral area, and when I entered, my heart was still clenching with anxiety, but to my surprise, the conversation was different. At first it was awkward, the words were difficult, as if we were all speaking in a foreign language, but then something began that I did not expect. They asked questions about my life, my job, my new apartment, and most importantly, they really listened to my answers. They didn't interrupt me, they didn't compare me to Chiara, they didn't try to point out what I could do better. When we were about to leave, my father said softly, but with some deep confidence, "We are proud of you, Ariana. We should have told you that a long time ago." And these words, so simple, so human, broke through some old, ossified wall inside me, I began to cry. Not from pain, but from the unexpected feeling that, perhaps for the first time in their lives, they saw in me not a duty, not a source of help, not a younger and less successful daughter, but a real, separate person with his own life, his achievements, his feelings. I didn't say that I forgive them. I haven't been there yet. But for the first time I thought that maybe someday I could. Over the next year, I continued to rebuild my life on my own terms. I started dating again, allowing myself to be vulnerable. She made new friends, with whom she shared not only her joy, but also her fears. I made my first solo trip to Europe in my life, with the money I saved, for the freedom I deserved. I walked the streets of Lisbon, sat in the coffee shops of Paris, listened to street musicians in Barcelona, feeling a new version of myself emerging inside me, strong, free, without the need to constantly look back. I realized that I was much stronger than I ever thought. I realized that I don't need family approval to be happy. And even though my relationship with my parents and with Chiara remains difficult, even though there are still pauses and misunderstandings between us, we began, slowly, carefully, step by step, to rebuild something that had been destroyed for a long time. Sometimes it seems to me that we will never become really close, like those perfect families from the movies where everything ends with hugs and dinner on the veranda. And I've accepted that possibility. Because maybe intimacy isn't always about perfect harmony. Sometimes intimacy is just a desire to try again. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.